The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining our School on Wheels workshop today, Tutoring Students with Special Needs. My name is Amanda Carr and I'm the trainer at School on Wheels. And I have with me Danielle Wiltchik, who's the advocate for Special Needs OC. Just a few notes before we get started. For the purposes of sound quality, all participants are currently muted. You can ask a question at any time using the question pane, so simply type in the question and press send. We'll choose the order of questions and read them out loud. You may also want to use headphones for better sound quality. Danielle Wiltchik is a special education tutor with master licensure in mild and moderate needs and a master's degree in special education cognitive disabilities. She has over 16 years of experience teaching children with differentiated abilities in public and private settings across the grade levels. A parent of 2 boys, she is also the owner of Special Needs OC, a private consulting and service provider that specializes in supporting individuals and families with learning differences, ADHD, autism, and other disabilities across the lifespan. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. Danielle, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for coming. So this is what I call my tutor's toolbox because we all need a toolbox to be able to go to. Like Ms. Carr was saying, I would like to make sure that everyone understands I'm not a lawyer, I'm a special education specialist, and anything that I say today, please understand it's just my point of view, it's just some ideas for you to use. So I hope that you get a pearl of wisdom from today. And there's a picture of me, so you know what I look like. And so let's talk a little bit. You probably know the statistics of children that are homeless or at risk of homelessness, but revisiting this information really reminds us of the children that we're working with. You know, they have a different background that most of us have experienced. Children are a product of their environment as well as many other things, but what they see and what they're able to process as a child is very different than what an adult can do. So it's usually not until they're in their teens that they're able to stand back and shape what their true identity is going to look like. So as we go through working with children, we have to ask ourselves, is the child's behavior or academic performance that of a child with a disability or a result of their experiences? We have probably seen some of the new information that's been coming out all the time about video gaming and TV watching and violence. And when a child experiences violence or sees it on TV, and we don't say that's not right or that's not what the real world is like, it doesn't hold the power as what they see. So what they hear and what they see is often much more, is different. And so what we have to look at is what does that shape our child? Also remembering that our children that we're working with sometimes move 3 times a year. On average, a homeless child moves about 3 times a year. So thinking about the consistency of academic instruction and how that changes as they move from one school to another or from one household to another. When we're looking a little bit more at this, we want to also look at their mental health. Is the child that you're working with inattentive or hypersensitive? Think about that these children often are on a defensive persona most of the day. Their sensitivities are heightened because they need to be aware of where they are in space and time because it's constantly changing. They hear everything. So they're constantly on hypervigilance often of what's going on behind them, what's going on in front of them. Do I have to worry? Do I have to be on defense, or can I let my guard down? And we see these types of behaviors often in actually veterans who are labeled PTSD. And so these experiences that these children have, we have to look at them and say, is this a product of a disability, or is this because of what they're experiencing in their daily life? Then you add on a whole nother level. Bloom's taxonomy talks about that there is a need for children to have a stable home, food, shelter, all the basics. And when you remove one of those basic foundations of a child, their ability to learn and their ability to maintain their learning is compromised. So this causes stress and anxiety and things that look like a disability. So let's talk a little bit about that. What is a disability? When we're looking at it, it's actually a physical or mental impairment. California Education Code, in fact, states that a disability is the physical or mental impairment that inhibits a student from making educational progress. So what is the difference between a student with a disability and a student that's homeless or not performing well at school? Well, it's a very fine line. A disability will last a lifetime. Homelessness can be cured, but there's no cure for a disability. Let me say that again. There's no cure for the disability. So how do we know if our child has a disability or not? Well, often if they are not disabled, the symptoms dissipate as they move into a more stable environment. Often when we're working with students, we say, oh my gosh, they're so inattentive, they're so hyper, they've got to have ADHD. Well, let's talk about that, since that's one of the first things that I often hear when I'm working with a parent or a teacher or a tutor. There's kids everywhere. Well, ADHD has actually been investigated, and it's a neurobiological basis. That means that they don't know really what causes it, but what they do know is what it affects and what it looks like. And so it actually affects the body's way of maintaining and producing different chemicals in the brain, which affects the way that a child interacts with the neurons in their brains and sending information. So we do see more and heightened ADHD in children that are premature, that have had multiple concussions, seizures, and other disabilities go along with ADHD. So there are three types. There's the inattentive type, which basically is that child that you start talking to and they then get that blank stare on their face, or they're listening to instructions and all of a sudden they seem that they're daydreaming. They have a hard time attending. It affects girls more than boys. And they're disorganized, or they forget things. Oh, I brought my homework to school, but I forgot to turn it in. The other kind is the hyperactive, and this is mostly seen in boys. And it's those kids that, you try and get them to sit in a chair and they're sitting on their foot and then they're standing up and then they're playing with their pencil and they're rolling the corner of their paper, or they're talking to you about one thing and you start to talk about something and then they change the topic right in the middle of your sentence and you're like, wow, this is a Ferrari that is just way going too fast. And then the third type is a combination of the two. So they seem like they're all over the board, and then they're calm and they're distant and they're not paying attention, and then they come back to you and they're once again disorganized. They don't know where to start on the paper. They forget to put their name. And so those two, hyperactive and inattentive, that combo is actually very evenly mixed between boys and girls. So what is a disability trait, and how do we see that in a child who's homeless? I like to say that when you are looking at a student, they have learning gaps, lags, gaps, and holes. A lag is that steady but slow progress. That's the student that you're working with, and time after time they're just making a little bit progress, but they understand where they're coming from and they can see where they're going. Then you have a gap. This is that they know what they're doing, but they can't really apply it. They saw it at school, they saw fractions at school, but maybe they've never worked in the kitchen with anyone or cooked with anyone, so they have no idea that you use fractions in the kitchen with measuring spoons and cups, and that it's part of your life. So, and then a whole is that they've never seen it. They've heard of the words Alice in Wonderland, but they've never seen the movie. They've never read the book. They've never heard the song, or they heard the song, but they didn't know, somewhere over the rainbow. They don't know that that's part of Alice in Wonderland. And so our children who have disabilities and our children who are homeless have these because, one, it's because of the changes in their life and what their ability to attend at school or their ability to have consistent instruction at school, and another is because their disability inhibits them from either moving forward and it stops them or makes it very slow progress. So also part of our students is, we talked a little bit about, I said, behavioral. They'll have maybe some aggression or hostility, and we have to look at our children of, let's see where are they coming from. What is their background? What have they been exposed to? We might not know this, so if they become defensive, if you become defensive, they're going to become more defensive. You have to just kind of be like, okay, I see that this is really hard. Let's push it to the side and let's keep moving on something else. What else would you like to do? So behaviors are, and I'll discuss a little bit more later, are actually a reactionary process to frustration, anxiety, and fear. So how do we know when a student who's homeless has a disability? The school usually does the testing, and professionals in the field are able to tease out, is the symptoms that the child have a form of a disability, or is it due to the environment and the history that the child has been exposed to? So once again, what we see is as sustainable living environments happen for our children, the traits that they might have shown dissipate as they move forward in their careers. So then it comes down to, why are we here today? Well, what can we do? Number one thing that we have to remember is we have to know our own expectations may be completely different than those of the students we're working with. They might have, they've just come from a whole day worth of work. One of the last things they might want to do is to sit down and do more and do a lot of it. So we have to think about, what is our student available to do today? Is it that they have 5 math problems and we do 2, and I write on the paper that that child really showed an understanding of those 2 problems and we moved on because they were done? Or is it something more along the lines of, maybe we have to put the hardest thing that we really need to work on, maybe we have to actually just say, not today. Or that's what we spend our entire time on. So look at it from their point of view. What are they coming from? They also know they don't know often what their afternoon is going to be when they leave you. So they've just had a whole day of holding it together at school, and they have no idea what's going to really happen after they leave you. So there's all of that going on in their heads, and that mental health really affects the way that they can attend and work with you. So if you notice a child is starting to get a little anxious, if you get anxious, they're going to feed off of that. So be mindful of your own reactions to the child. Work with your student, allowing them to, know that you're there to help them today with what they can do today, and what will happen tomorrow will happen tomorrow. But we're just going to focus on what we can do right here in this time. What can they do? What are they available for? So let's get into some tricks of the trade, some tools to put in your toolbox. One of the major things that you've probably been hearing me say is do with, work with, don't do for. Often our children are, oh, I just don't want to do it, you write for me. That might work a little bit with some of our younger children, but it works much better for our children to say, well, tell me what you want to say, I'll make some notes so you don't forget. And then let's talk about it. Now you write it. I'll help you remind you of what your ideas were. So you're not doing the work for them. You're doing it with them. So another idea for them to not do for them is, instead of you holding a pencil, have them hold a pencil and you do it together. You hold your work up maybe on a clipboard away from your body, or close to your body so they can't see, and you say, okay, you do the problem and you walk me through it, and I'll do the problem over here and you be telling me how to do it. And let's see if we both get the same answers. That way you're doing it together. You're both working. Let them be the expert. Let them teach you how to do it. In Common Core nowadays, we don't always have the same language. It used to be that you would carry, and now it's regrouping. Before, you used to just use standard division, and now they're doing things like all types of different ways of teaching kids. And so you want them to tell you, and it's okay to say to them, I have not learned how to do this way. Will you show me? And if you both can't do it, it's always a great thing to be able to maybe find someone that's there that might have a little more experience. Because if you're going to be doing multiplication and they give you a lattice format and you've never seen it before, it's confusing for an adult. And imagine when it's for a kid that only got partial instruction in it or got it at school but can't remember it. So if you're both at loss, it's okay to say that. By also having them be the expert and telling you how to do things, they're refreshing their memory. They're telling you what they gained at school. And that allows them to maybe fill in a gap or a hole as you're working with them. So I like to say is one of the tools you want to have is you want to be a talk show host. You want to take 5, especially when they're off task. Totally take their minds off of school. Hey, what's your favorite team? What would you want to do if if you could go, if it snowed tomorrow, what would you like to, would you ski? Would you sled? Would you go ice skating? What would be interesting for you to try out? If you do want to talk about school, to get them back after you had this couple of minutes of talking about something off task, then you can ask them very positive, open-ended questions, not yes, no, did you like school, yes, no, that doesn't work. Ask them, what went well at school today? What did you like to do today? What did you learn that was interesting? By asking them what went well, what did you like, what did you learn, it opens up their mind to, oh, we're coming back to learning environments. We're coming back to learning about what we learned at school today. And it lowers their anxiety. Children who feel connected to their tutors and teachers have better performance, and their work inhibition absolutely just disintegrates. So another tool for you is become a secretary. Plan it out with your students. Identifying hard to easy tasks and establishing time limits provides the students with 2 skills. First, you're teaching them organization. Start with the difficult work. This allows the students to place their freshest mind and all of their attention and knowing that you're there to walk with them first. The success is built in. They don't have to fear the hard. As they move through going from the hardest item to the easiest item, they go from the most support down to independent work. So if they identify that, oh, I can do this by myself, and you know you only have an hour that day, that might be something that they take home with them, that when they leave you, they do it independently. Another aspect is asking them, how much time do you think this is going to take us? By not using a timer to keep them focused, because that might cause some anxiety, but by asking them, how long do you think this is going to take us? And they say, oh, it's going to be easy, it's going to be 10 minutes. And 35 minutes later when you're finished, you go, oh my gosh, we took 35 minutes to do this. That was not an easy task for either of us. Include yourself in the statements. Make sure that you're part of it because you're working with them. That helps them to develop temporal perception. That's something that they thought would only take 10 minutes took them 3 times as long. That helps them to also know that next time I'm going to come into a problem like this, I'm going to need more time to be successful to do it. To use and focus their attention as well on keeping on task. If you break things up, we'll talk about that in the next one too, is you want to, in number 4 I said that break the activity up. So let's focus on you're writing a 5-sentence paragraph, or I mean a 5-paragraph paper. Take one topic sentence, discuss what you want to cover in the paper, make the notes with the child, and then go on to the next 2 or 3 sentences. Breaking it, chunking it, talking about something else and coming back is okay. Build in breaks. Build in step-by-step aspects of it. If you get a child and they say to you that they're stuck, they have no idea how to do any of it, go back to letting them be the expert. Well, what do you know about this? I don't know any of it. Well, do you know how to read the directions? That's something. We got that done. Okay, we got the directions. Let's highlight what we're supposed to do in the directions, and then let's go through. If you're doing comprehension questions, break it up by saying, let's read the comprehension questions before we even go into the paragraph or the book that we have to read. So you know what you're looking for. So you have a point of reference. And then you say, well, what do you think we have to do now? What information do we have to look for? And if they're still like, I don't know, restate it in a different way. Say, well, maybe we could do it this way. Maybe you tell me, I'll write it down and I'll remind you what you said. So keeping it going, keeping the circus moving is a great way. But also knowing to get messy. When I say get messy, even if your kid's in high school and they're working on a concept in science or in math or something and they just can't grasp it, get chalk, get markers, draw it out. Make pictures, visual information. If you look at our world today, I think it's like 87% of the information that we're presented with nowadays is visual. They're picture-oriented. Commercials are now pictures. All of our pop-ups have an emblem or a symbol or something that represents something else. We want to put some sort of visual cue to the concepts our students are learning. So take it outside and draw it out. Some of our students, though, are also kinesthetic. So Gardner's 7 behaviors of learning basically say, if you can't see it, if you can't hear it, move it. Be it Justin Timberlake, go outside and dance it out, rap it out, figure out some other way. You don't need to sit in order to learn. And in fact, most children need to move. Physical movement pumps the blood through the brain faster and it gets them moving and engaged in their learning on a multiple levels. So I often say, wiggle, jump, do a little dance. If you're going to say to the child, we're going to learn about amoebas, what do you think an amoeba might move like? It doesn't have arms and legs. What if an amoeba takes on its food? What is that going to look like? If it divides, how do we do that? What's our bodies going to do if we're going to be that aspect? So putting things into movement or into visual imagery allows the child to put it into long-term memory. Also allowing them to then say, okay, turn the paper over. Now tell me, what did you draw? What did you move? Show me what you just learned. So you practiced it and then you review it. And then if they can, you ask them, do it again tonight before you go to sleep. Visualize the things that you drew. Move in your bed or in, wherever you might be on the couch or on the sleeping bag that you're sleeping on that night. envision your body moving to the concepts that you learned, and they will actually remember it. Some of the questions that came to me too were about behavior. My students come in and they're just, I can't get past this thick facade of I'm a tough guy or that nothing bothers me. Remember that their behaviors are a defense mechanism. Anytime you get back talk or some sort of frustration or verbiage out of them, it really is their stress, it's misunderstanding, it's confusion. So for our students that do have behavioral concerns, remember to recognize them as a person. Don't say, oh, that kid must be, has emotional disability. Oh, he's going to end up, in jail or something. Change your persona and your idea of who that child is. In order to work with kids who do have behavioral supports, remember that you want to give them a reason to attend. And that reason 99% of the time has to be you. They want to attend because they want to be with you. They're there because they want to learn, but mostly they're there because of you. You're putting the effort to take the time to be with them, and they need that. They need to know that they are fantastic individuals that have the capacity to learn. So don't promise them a toy or a reward. Don't say, I'm going to go buy you a soda or something, because their teachers are not going to do that for them either. You want to use what's called positive specific praise. You took the time to reread the directions. That's a great skill to have. That's going to really help you tomorrow. I noticed you changed your answer to a correct one. I didn't catch that. That's great. Even if you have to put a little bit of a lie in there and telling them that you didn't see what they saw, even though you did. Or you might say, if you did notice that they made a mistake, you can say, I was working through this in my head and it's not making sense to me. Will you walk through this one with me again? Giving them a very positive view. So stay calm. Talk softly. If you roll your eyes or you do that, even if you're letting off steam, they're not hearing that. So watch what you're doing. Remain calm. Be kind. Validate. Say to them, yeah, this is not easy. This is hard for me too. I remembered when I was a kid, I didn't get it the first couple of years. It took me until I was in college that it really made sense. Letting them know what they're learning isn't always going to be hard, but also that you understand where they are. And then always provide a way for that child to save face. You always want that kid to feel like they have the opportunity to learn. So some of the things that we want to make sure when we're using our words is we can turn on a child or turn off a child with a single word. Removing encouraging phrases like, I know you can do this, you did it last time. Reminding them that they used to do it, well, that was yesterday. That's completely different from today, and that's going to be completely different from tomorrow. I can only work with the child that I have today, what they are able to do. So we have to be mindful of that. So you emphasize the words. So if you're using the words but, here's a great one, but. I know this is hard, but you can do it. They don't always hear this is hard. As soon as you say the but, everything that you said prior to that becomes in the past, and they only hear in front. So you think, oh, I know this is hard, but you can do this. You can do this might sound very encouraging, but it might not be to the kid because they're thinking, no, I can't. So you want to flip it. You can do this, but it is hard, and I'm going to be here with you. If you have to use the word, make sure whatever you put in front, you know the kid's not going to remember. The word and, together, with, when they hear we, that word we are going to write a paper, and you're going to tell me what we're going to do, and you're going to be the expert, and I'm going to sit here and I'm going to be your secretary, and you tell me what to do. That's power to a child who usually doesn't have power in their life. So removing the words of but and no, or I don't care. I just had a fight with my girlfriend. Instead of saying I don't care, say wow, validate them and say that must be really hard, and then go on. And I'm sure that's a really hard thing to have to put to the side while we work today. Would you like to talk about it for a few minutes? No? Okay. Or yes, take a few moments and then work back into getting back on task. Also, try and not use the word good. You're a good kid. Don't ever put good. You're a good student. You're a good writer. Remove the word good, because that means that there's an opposite to that, that there is a bad. Say that they've made a great choice in writing about that, that be specific. Your writing is beautiful. You are taking the time to really show your penmanship. We want to make sure too that if a child does something negative, you want to say, wow, that wasn't a very, let's say they ripped their paper in half. That wasn't a really great choice, but I'm sure we could fix it. Allow them to say face, I wonder how we're going to fix this. Or letting them, asking them, to explain something to you, and then say, thanks for explaining. I'm starting to understand why you got so angry. So bringing them back, because you want them to know you always care, and as long as you're able to be their tutor, that you're going to be there for them. So here are some things I wanted to bring up. Students might look like they don't want to play, they don't want to engage with you, and so some of the things is, what do they like to do? Find out what they like to do. I mean, posing even, if I had a rocket ship, I would go to the moon and then to Mars. I wonder what I would find on Mars. And if they don't respond, they're going, that's silly. I'm like, well, what do you like to do? Also, if they are very rigid in their thoughts, kids on the Asperger spectrum, or kids who are exposed to where they're constantly changing and they want things a specific way, they want to do things a specific way, it's very hard for them. So give them, we're going to do 2 more and then we're going to take a break. Or let them know that by setting it up from the hardest to the easiest, that we're going to get through as much as we can, and then we're going to take a break, or we're going to do something different. Letting them know too, walking them through allows them to know what is going to happen with our time together. So almost having like a schedule for those kids that have a real hard time moving from one topic to the next, having a schedule and being able to have them mark it off and say, we got that done. It's done. We don't ever have to do that today again. Remember, today is the only day that we're working with. And if the person doesn't seem to have a perspective of someone else's, like they hear someone say something and they start to laugh, or they say something, explain to them what might be going on, but validate the other student. Wow, they're crying because they had a really hard time today. I'm sure that we've both had times where we felt like crying, and we'll give them their space, and then let's get back to it. Let's try and get done what we can today. And just always have clear expectations with your kids. So if they start to cuss with you, or they're trying to test the boundaries, and they're going to start talking about a topic that you're like, whoa, this is so far out of my wheelhouse, I am not a therapist and this is not appropriate, it's okay to tell them that. It's okay to say, you know what, that's something you can take up with your teacher at school. I'm here to help you do your homework. I'm here to fill in, to help you learn this strategy in your reading comprehension, so that we can make sure that tomorrow, you might have a better day or that you might grasp this concept in the future. So it's okay to have very clear expectations, but once again, try and set it up so a way the kid feels like it's a win for you and it's a win for them. Saving face is very important for any teenager. So I wanted to talk a little as we're coming to the end of our discussion today. Some of the interventions that I find very helpful is getting to their eye level. So if they need to lay on the floor with a clipboard, you lay on the floor with a clipboard. If your body doesn't allow you to do that, let them know, I want to be right there next to you, but I'm really old and I can't. But it's okay to take their work up on a wall and say, let's stand at the wall and do our work. We don't have to do our work at a table. Move to where the child feels that they're going to be successful. And remembering that their behaviors will come and go, but the child's is always there. So keeping positive, keeping calm. If they are starting to get really off task, if you whisper, they might hear you better. So whispering or talking, like put on a southern drawl and see if that helps them and say, okay, Captain, let's wrap up this rodeo and get moving. They might think you're a little silly and a little strange, but humor goes a very far way in redirecting a child. And then always remembering that you want to praise them for what they're doing right. Be very positive about what they're doing. If they're choosing a poor choice, try and ignore as much as you can. As long as it's not stopping you from making forward motion, ignore the tapping. If the tapping of a pencil on a table bothers you, say, hey, you can do that on your leg, allowing them to still do it because they need the movement. Maybe you say, you know what, I like how you're tapping. Let's put the pencil down and let's tap our chest and find a rhythm and a beat to our reading. Finding a way to encourage them and validating the actions that they're taking is a great way of encouraging them to learn more. And there are my kids, and that is our presentation, and I wanted to be able to get to questions and comments to any of the participants.
Yes, if anybody has a question, you can please type them in now. Danielle, I did have a question from early during the registration process. One of the tutors, I think you might have covered it a little bit, but it was basically about students wanting that the student has short attention span and the tutor wants to review topics with them and find a way to kind of get them back on task without using a timer, or can they use a timer? Because you did mention that that causes stress.
It can cause stress. So for kids that like to be timed, you have to ask them if they're competitive in nature. Using a timer is great, but it also encourages them, often if they're in a competitive mode, to skip, to not pay it. If they're like, I'm going to beat my time, it's okay to do that if they have the concept. But if you're reviewing new concepts, get creative. Take a piece of paper and tear it into 4 pieces and draw out the concept and show a picture and say, remember what this picture is. What does that picture represent that you drew? Reviewing things in different ways of if you can come up with acronyms or, like maybe a sound or something that would help them to remember it. If you're going back and keeping them focused, breaking it into small chunks and saying, we're going to do 3 things and then we're going to take a 1-minute brain break. We're going to cover 3 more topics and then we're going to take a 1-minute brain break. And as soon as that minute is what you time, your break is what you time, and then you want to get back. And then once again, going back to that whole aspect of how much time do you think it's going to take us to do these 3 concepts? 5 minutes? Great. Let's write down the time where we are now. I'm trying to make sure that they don't see a clock anywhere, because what you want them to do is to focus on the concept, not so much on the time that it takes to do it. And then say, okay, then we're going to take a brain break. It might even be a dance break. You might pull out your Pandora on your phone and, if it's kind of quiet. You guys do a little dance break, and then you get back to work, because once again, movement is very important. But you have to kind of gauge your child, gauge your student into what will work for them. If they don't even want to talk about that concept or that topic, switch, put it to the end, pick something else that they have. But by listing it all out and saying, this is what we have to do, limit to 4 things, say, these are the 4 things we have to do. What seems most interesting to you? And then you advise them, I really want to be able to help you the most. So if we were to do the hardest thing first, I could help you the most and get it off our plate, and then we can focus on the more easier stuff. That's more important than just drilling through and trying to get through everything. If they start to get off task, you can also ask them, what is it that is on your mind? Write it on a sticky note or write it on a piece of paper, draw a little symbol or something that will remind you, and when we finish this task, you can tell me what was on your mind. And then when you finish that task, actually go back and make sure that you do that you give yourselves time to go back and say, so what was on your mind? What was taking you away from being able to do the activity that we had planned? And let's talk about it. And it's okay to do that. That works very well at school too, of kids who are often distracted by things in their head. By simply jotting it down and knowing that they're going to revisit it later, they can push it physically out of their mind and focus a little bit better. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. Thank you.
Okay.
That's a great answer. So I do have a question about. Yes, thank you. So I do have a question about IEPs. So I've talked to several tutors who are working with students, and they feel like their students should have an IEP, and the student doesn't. So what do you recommend if a tutor is in that situation and they really do feel like the student needs that kind of intervention at the school level, but they don't really have that power or authority?
Actually, they do. By law, anyone can make a request to the school as what's called child find. So under law, a teacher, tutor, or someone who directly works with a child in an academic setting can actually advocate for a child and say to a school, you can write a letter saying, I've been working with this child for X amount of months, and I've noticed that over the course of this time that these are the areas of deficit that continue to hinder the child from learning. I always would say, please go through, before you do that independently though, to talk to whoever is your supervisor at your site. Because you don't want to, first of all, I don't know what the what do you call it, the requirements or the protocols for Schools on Wheels is, but by law you can write a letter to the school and say that you as an educator or as a tutor do have concerns that this child may have a disability versus it being something that a situational experiences that they're having. And then it's up to the school to contact the family to discuss with them what the next best options. The parents, the legal guardians, or whoever, or foster families, whoever is in charge, are the only ones that are then able to take it to the next step though. They have to be then able to have a legal guardian sign and gain permission to assess the child. Assessing a child is very difficult in the fact that it causes a lot of stress on them. And if they already have stresses, that can actually it can actually make the testing almost invalid. So you have to be very careful about what is going on in the child's life. If they are constantly moving and they don't have a stable home life, that those results may not be their true indicative abilities, because the testing looks at cognitive testing, which is how does their brain function, academic testing, behavioral testing, speech and language testing, so not just how they speak, but the language they use. If their second language, they might be also tested not only in English, but also in their native language. So this testing can take up to 15 or more hours of testing depending on the child and their needs. So not that I'm saying don't test the child, I'm just saying as a tutor, you can write to the school and say that these are an area of concern and that they may want to speak to the parents or the guardian about possibly looking into that this is more than just situational. Does that make sense?
Great, thank you. Yeah,
Okay.
and at School on Wheels, yes, I should have mentioned at School on Wheels we do ask that our tutors get permission to talk to school staff about their student from their parents. So usually that's done at the first session. So as long as the tutor has that permission,
Right.
we would really suggest that they get that permission first.
And if your child does have what's called a 504 plan or an IEP, so a 504 plan is a list of interventions for children who have a disability but do not need direct intervention from a person at school. And an IEP is that which a person does need intervention from a learning specialist or a speech and language therapist or a psychologist. An IEP provides the services and a 504 provides just the interventions. If your child has or your student has either one of those, you want to make sure that you are aware of the interventions that are being offered and incorporate those into what you're using, as well as what are their goals. If you have an IEP, you have goals. A 504 does not. If they have an IEP, they will have a list of goals that they are working on, and there might be very specific things that they are using as interventions that are part of that, those teaching goals. So it's important to be aware of that as well so that you can incorporate those same strategies so you're not fighting the system, you're working with the system in improving their educational outcomes.
Fabulous. That's great to know that distinction. I wasn't aware of that, so great. So we do have another question about working with older students. The tutor is curious about, if you have any specific tips for older students, since sometimes they will probably be a little less likely to want to do something like dance or sing or something that they might see as silly. So do you have any tips for working with them in particular?
So those are the students that, if they have any artistic ability, you really want to work with the visualization. So planning things out for them. So if they have a paper that they have to write, planning it out with them of what needs to be in their topic or their cover page, what needs to be in their introduction, what needs to be covered over the next paragraphs, planning it out with them and then giving them some examples of transition words, giving them some examples of even just listing them out of some phrases that might be a great way to lead in. And then also just making sure that if you are working on so that's if you're like doing some sort of paper, planning it out with them and then putting dates on it. Okay, this paper isn't due for another 3 weeks, so you want to make sure that you have your introductory paper page done in the next 3 days. And then when I see you again, we're going to review that paper and then we'll make some editing and stuff and we'll talk about it. And then 3 days from then, I want you to have like 3 paragraphs written and then we'll go through that. So breaking it down and letting them know that you're going to be part of that process is really helpful. When you're working with concepts of vocabulary or if they're doing a French class or something where they're learning a foreign language, adding the visuals, drawing pictures so that they can visualize what that might mean, how to use that word as well, having them try and throughout the time that you're together, how many times can they incorporate that concept or that word into what you're using so that they're not just orally saying it, that they're also then every time they orally say it, they're putting the picture in their head as well. High school students also need to know that that like with math, step by step, where can I find the information? If you have sticky notes, labeling in their math books where they're going to find the algorithms that they need to solve as reference. How do you minimize the information on the paper? So it might be that, once again, you go back to what are you asked to do and breaking it down so that they understand what it really is that they have to do. That's going to be their their greatest tool for you. If you're working with a child and you find that, you know, writing a 5-page essay is not going to work for them, but they could do a very decent 3-page, and you're working with the family, I would say contacting the school and saying, you know what, we have a great 3-page. Can you modify the grading for this one? Because this is really what they're able to do. That's something that you can ask for as well when you're working with some of our students, is if you have a really good working relationship with the school or with the family and they have a good working relationship with the school, looking for ways of saying, can they just demonstrate the concept? Have they demonstrated what they know? And then all the rest is fluff. So it goes back to, you know, if they have 50 problems and they've done 10 independently, absolutely perfect, and you didn't have to do anything other than stand there and go, wow, that's great. You did all of those by yourself without any help. You could probably write on that page, these were all done independently and demonstrates concept. We had to stop in order to continue with other work that's due that day. Most times teachers will understand that situational, that your time is very limited and that you have many, many, many things to cover. And so if they can show that they already know it, why beat it? Why, like I said, beat a dead horse? They've done it, move on.
Great, thank you. Those are really great tips. I like the idea of doing the visual and the planning step by step for sure. I think that's always helpful for any student really, but definitely for students with attention and behavioral issues too. So we do have one last question. With special needs children, do they have different credit requirements to graduate?
They can. So it depends on the level of disability. If your student has a disability that requires them to have an extended year or two, most times once they've got to their senior year, and let's say they don't have enough credits to graduate, they have the option of going to adult education center and continuing their education through public school until they're 22. And they'll get a certificate of completion at graduation, or they'll get like something that says that they're going to finish eventually. If they have where they're not able to meet the criteria for graduation, they will have an IEP that says that they are doing a certificate of completion, which means that they will not meet all the graduation credits, but they have done as much as their ability or their disability allows them to do, and at which case they would then usually graduate and at a later time, if they deem it's necessary, go on for a GED. But a certificate of completion, even though it's not as good as a diploma, it does still allow them to go to community college. It still allows them to pursue other areas if they wanted to go like to ITT or other areas. But students who are on an IEP often have modified goals, modified amounts. So the overall emphasis for students in high school is 70%. If they perform 70% of the class, they've passed the class. So if they can meet 70% of the requirements of the class, they've passed it. And then they are still able to graduate with a diploma. You can have an IEP and be in AP classes and be gifted. Your ADHD, or maybe you have a mood disorder, or maybe you have bulimia, those disabilities do fall under an IEP. You still can have support services and be in an AP class. You can be also what's called twice exceptional. So you might be off the chain fantastic in math, but you couldn't write a paper worth a third grader. That twice exceptional ability, often you'll see kids in AP classes for math or for writing, and in another area they're getting resource room. So you can have an IEP and still be in AP classes as well.
Great, thank you. That's a really great perspective to have. I think it's really important to remember how talented these students can be. Great, so Danielle, thank you very much for offering us this great workshop. I think it will be a fabulous resource for our tutors. And thank you to all the tutors who attended today. We do really appreciate you taking this extra initiative in making a difference in your students' lives. So thank you. We'll end with that.
Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.